Hello BookTube, we're doing part 2 of War and Peace today. So this is going to cover chapters 10 to 21 inclusive. Firstly, we're going to have a look at the new characters that we've had within this section. So firstly we have the Rostovs. This is Count Rostov, is described as a large man with greying hair, and he seems very happy-go-lucky and nothing seems to worry him, and he's laughing a lot and talking loudly and not caring about money. Secondly, there's Countess Rostova, and she is described as having an oriental style face that has been worn out with childbearing because she's had 12, which is a bit ridiculous, but common for the time. She obviously, not all 12 have actually survived because we're not introduced to anywhere near 12 children. Nextly, we have their son, not the youngest son, but one of the sons. He seems to be about 15 to 18, I'm not entirely sure, and that's Nicholas. Now Nicholas is following his cousin Boris, who I'll mention later, off to war. He's dropped out of university to do this. On the day that we meet these people, it is the name day for the Countess and her youngest daughter. So the next one who shares the Countess's name is Natasha. Now Natasha is desperately in love with Boris, again I'll mention him later, and she is about 12 or 13, so it's that first flourish of love, and she's not entirely sure if she knows what she's doing. She's still a child, growing into a woman. And lastly, from the family of the Rostovs, we have Vera. Now Vera is the oldest daughter, and she's actually present in the sitting room with her mother while she's receiving her well wishes for her name day. And Vera is, by all accounts, a very harsh girl who sees the world as it is almost, and is very sharp-tongued and a bit of a hard-nosed person. So she doesn't come up much, but I kind of like her. Nextly, we had Anna Mikhailovna in the first section. In this one we get to know a little bit more about her. She is widowed. Her widowhood is marred with poverty, and she is at the mercies of friends and people she considers family. Her son Boris, who she was asking Prince Vasily to do a favour for, to move him into the guard, he is off to war, but she has the problem that she doesn't have any money. She needs 500 rubles to outfit him for this part of his military career. So the son Boris has lived for most of his life and been educated for most of his life within what seems to be living within the Rostovs family, and consequently is in love with, and it's reciprocated from, Natasha. Now Natasha seems a lot more enamored with him than he is with her, even though he assures her that in 4 or 5 years he will ask for her hand in marriage. And this is where you can tell she's very childlike, because she sort of counts it out in her head, and it's not something that you would do if you were getting a proposal. Anna Mikhailovna and Boris both live within the Rostovs' household. The last householder of the Rostovs is Sonia, and Sonia is the Count Rostov's niece and is desperately and heart-wrenchingly in love with the son Nicholas, to the point where she's very jealous of his affections given to anyone other than herself, and creates creates scenes because of this. We then move to the people in Count Bezyakov's home and residence. The main people that have been looking after him in his illness are the three princesses Semenovna, the oldest of which is Catherine. Now she seems to be in her 60s. She is incredibly conniving and manipulative and holding Pierre out, who's the Count's son, Pierre, out of the sick room, won't let him see his father. So we're not described the middle princess. We are, however, told about only one real detail about the youngest princess, who looks almost identical to the middle princess, except for a mole on her upper lip, which is seen to be very attractive again. Tolstoy seems to have a thing for imperfection, almost. Lastly, we have one of the daughters of the visiting well-wishers to Countess Rostova's sitting room, and that is the girl Karagina, and she seems to be the main cause of Sonia's disappointment and disillusion with Nicholas's affection. So I'm going to go through a quick run through of the chapter summaries and some of my thoughts about those. Hopefully this video is going to be a little bit more concise and shorter than the last one, since I've done a bit of planning this time. So chapter 10, we are opened into the Rostovs' house, and we are told about the name day visitations, and the Countess is at the end of that process, and she is hearing, and we get introduced to the events that happened when we left Pierre in Petersburg. As it turns out, they jumped in a carriage with the bear and went off to see an actress. Now, for anyone who's read much period drama, we're pretty sure that an actress means a prostitute. During the night, they also run into a bit of trouble with the police, who are trying to get them to unchain the bear, and for the police officers' troubles, they strap him to the back of the bear and chuck them in a canal. Now, Count Rostov finds this hilarious. He is slapping his knee and laughing at the top of his voice. The ladies of the sitting room don't find it quite so funny, because as a consequence of this, Prince Vasily's son Anatole has been exiled from Petersburg. So has their other accomplices, and as well as Pierre. Chapters 11 through 12, we meet the children that I've mentioned in the character summaries previously. We learn about the love affairs between Natasha and Boris, and Nicholas and Sonia. In chapter 13, we follow Natasha outside of the sitting room, where she's hiding in the shrubbery and watches the exchange between Sonia, who's very upset because Nicholas had been talking to the daughter Karagina, and that she sees them kissing. This then spurs her on to go and find Boris and pull him into the shrubbery and kiss him. This then leads to him telling her that he promises he will ask for her hand in marriage in 4 years' time. Chapter 14, Vera is expelled from the sitting room so that her mother and Anna Mikhailovna, who we find are very good friends from childhood, which makes me think the cousin term between Boris and the Rostov children is more of an affectionate term than a actual indication of familiar family ties. Vera finds the two sets of couples sitting together in the conservatory and starts an attacking sort of campaign of them, telling them, you know, things like they're not going to be together, etc., etc. She seems a very vicious, poisonous, toxic sort of person. But she doesn't realise it at all, as when they're leaving and Natasha says, you know, all you've done is attack us, she feels like, hang on a minute, I'm the one who was attacked here and called names. So we then come back to the Countess Rostova and Anna Mikhailovna talking about her situation financially and the fact that she's been widowed, and they allude to a lawsuit that has left her destitute. She only has 25 rubles to her name and she needs the 500 to outfit Boris. We then follow, in chapter 15, we follow Anna and her son Boris to go and visit the Count Bezukhov. Here, Anna runs up against a gamut of people trying to keep her out, and these are Prince Vasily and the oldest Princess Catherine. They try and stop her from going in because they see her as a rival to their inheritance, which we learn as the chapters go on that she actually did come 12 months beforehand and talked to the Count and had him expel the princesses from his rooms for a certain amount of time because of something that they'd told her. This also led to the rewriting of his will. The Princess Catherine comes out of the sick room and basically sort of gives up a little bit, and Anna Mikhailovna feels that she's won a position within the household, nursing her uncle, as she calls him, and says that she will be back to nurse him, as she sees that it is her family duty. Prince Vasily is not happy about this. Meanwhile, Boris has gone off to find Pierre, as he has been charged with the duty of inviting Pierre to the dinner party at the Rostovs in honour of their name day. Pierre initially thinks he is actually Nicholas Rostov, and initially Boris doesn't correct him until entirely necessary. He then assures him that we will not be asking for money from your father. I don't know if this was a blatant lie or he just doesn't know what his mother's machinations are. We find out in chapter 16 that Pierre, since his arrival back from Petersburg and his exile from Petersburg back to Moscow, he has been barred from seeing his father at all. This is further posturing of the princesses and Prince Vasily to keep him out of the Count's way in order to hopefully change the Count's mind about the will that they're pretty sure exists. In chapter 17, we see that Countess Rostova asks her husband for the money to give to Anna Mikhailovna to outfit her son. And we sort of get a bit of an inkling that money isn't that great in the Rostov family either, where Dmitri, their butler, sort of mentions that it's indicated that there might not be money available, and especially fresh, nicely minted bills. But the Countess is given the money. Chapter 18, we start into the Rostov's dinner. Now this is very interesting. We meet a lady called the Terrible Dragon, which is Maria, who is known for speaking her mind and being very blunt, and not particularly for her familial connections and money. Although she's obviously got money with the gift that's given to Natasha for her name day. Pierre has arrived, and as soon as he arrived, he sat in the middle, sat in a chair that he first came to, and it ends up being right in the way of where everyone wants to go. He is spoken to by the Countess and also by Anna Mikhailovna, and he gives monosyllabic responses and won't pick up on social cues. He also looks like he's well on the way to being drunk whilst in the dinner itself. That being said, there is a German hussar that is sitting up near the Count. They split the dinner table, one end is for the women, the other end is for the men, and in the middle are the children. We see the Count holding up the German hussar as someone who drinks well and eats well and speaks his mind, and that's seen as a really good thing as far as he's concerned. He's getting quite animated on the manifesto of war that's been delivered recently, and he's actually been privy to have a look at. But they're actually interrupted by Maria, the terrible dragon, who's wanting to know what's going on down there, because the hussars banging on the table and getting very loud and feeling the patriotism come through within this forum. Maria is then suddenly interrupted as well by Natasha standing up and demanding, and we've got to remember she's 12, 13, what is going to be for dessert, and not just saying it once when everyone's shocked and maybe sitting down, continuing in an incredibly entitled manner, demanding what to know is for dessert. We leave the dinner there and we move on to the after dinner entertainments, where they are playing cards, a game called Boston. They are inviting the children to have a recital of their singing and their instrument playing, when Natasha notices that Sonia's gone missing. She ends up finding her in a heap, crying her eyes out in a very dramatic effect, saying that Vera has found the notes that Nicholas was writing out for her, and informs her that at no point will they ever be married. So then we move on to the dancing, and there are two interesting parts about this. Natasha has been told by her mother to go and invite Pierre to dance. He's unsure about this, however, he agrees, and she feels incredibly adult, and we see sort of, she's not physically attracted to him, but she likes the idea of being looked at as an adult. We then see a very amusing scene with a dance between Count Rostov and the terrible dragon, Maria, and it's a sort of a very peasant style dance is what you get, and he's a very large man and he's jumping around and making a fool of himself for the entire household. We have all the serfs come in and actually watch him dancing, and all the cooking staff and everyone there. And Maria, also a very large and imposing figure, can only bring herself to sort of animate her face during this dance, but it's seen as just as funny. The final chapter in this section is the Death Watch style chapter, as I've named it. We're seeing that very interesting opening lines with there was as the sixth Anglaise is played within the Rostovs' household, which is the dancers, the Count has his sixth stroke. Now, Prince Vasily corners the princess and gets her to understand that even though Pierre is illegitimate, the Count has actually written to the Emperor to legitimize him and have it so that he can inherit everything. The princess at first is standoffish as always and doesn't believe a word, and suddenly she comes around and realizes that he's right. And this is also where we find out that Anna Mikhailovna a year ago had come in and poisoned the Count against the princesses and caused the new will to be written. The new will and the letter to the Emperor to be written. So the next section that I'll be reading in my version, which is the one that you can get from Gutenberg, and also I found this one, which has the same setup as the one from Gutenberg. So for this one and the Gutenberg version, I'll be reading chapters 22 to 27 inclusive, just in case I don't get this up quick enough. The one after that is actually chapters 27 to the end of book 1 and to chapter 6 inclusive of book 2. So if you like my analysis and my summaries, please give us a thumbs up. If you want to keep following, can you give us a subscription down below, and I will see you next time. Bye!